in a very, very sad case. A 24-year-old reporter by the name of Allison Parker and a 27-year-old photographer by the name of Adam Ward were killed, gunned down by a former disgruntled employee of the station. I'm not even going to dignify it by saying this guy's name on the air. A horrendous act. And joining us on the line is Dr. Jeff Gardere, psychologist, to talk about these issues. Dr. Gardere, thank you for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Sure, pleasure as always.
All right, let me start off by saying this guy had issues, right? I mean, we knew he sort of had a volatile personality. He had to get escorted by the police when they fired him from the station. Is there anything that should have sent off alarm bells? Is there anything that should have given folks, sort of an advance notice this guy might go off the deep end?
Well, here's the problem, and we see it every time with one of these shooters. That when we do what's called a triangulation, in other words, bringing in all of the information, looking at all of the different past reports on the individual, what people had to say, then we see a very clear, linear picture of the madness. This guy was hired in several markets, media markets, and appeared to have been a pretty good reporter from what I've read. But eventually, and it seemed like it happened at almost every job, they would start to notice the bizarre behaviors, the paranoia, the anger. So what you said, the key word was this personality. And I think what we're seeing here is not a schizophrenia, but someone with a very severe personality disorder that is the hallmark of his mental illness.
Well, I know that there are a lot of laws that employers cannot release information publicly on somebody's conduct necessarily in the workplace. But do you see from this angle that we're doing now that maybe they should have tried to prosecute him for making threatening comments, or employers have a responsibility to not brush things under the rug or settle out of court? You've got to get a public record of things. Would that be potentially a solution to this?
I think that is the intent, and the possible solution is a good one there. But what we're dealing is with sheer numbers, and I think both of you know that when we're talking about the American workplace, there are so many individuals who have issues, emotional issues, but they don't rise to the level of being mentally ill like this individual. And so we have to be careful of people's civil rights, that, we don't try to have some sort of a witch hunt with these individuals, that things can be worked out in counseling. And this, by the way, this individual was sent to counseling, but quite obviously it didn't work. So this is going to be a continuing problem, but you're absolutely right. We need to be more diligent of these aberrant behaviors and make sure that we follow up on them.
All right. Well, listen to this soundbite. It's from Laurel Reynolds, a former WDBJ employee, who described this particular individual.
He's very aggressive towards people. He couldn't take criticism, and he took it personally. And at the station, he was let go, and he threw a huge tantrum that caused a lot of our coworkers to fear our own safety. We were in a lockdown the day that he was fired, and a few days later we had police detail that kind of watched over the station because we didn't know the extent of, I guess, his mental illness.
All right, so it got to the point where police had to escort him from the building. Police had to stay there, and they were so concerned about this that the police stayed there to make sure that he didn't come back for a few days, until a few days passed and things cooled off a little bit. When you have police involved in that, shouldn't something go into the record that says, don't let this guy buy a gun?
Yeah, and that's where we need to continue to revise our gun laws. Right now, my understanding is they have to have a criminal record. They have to be arrested. So your co-host was right. Perhaps if he was arrested, then he may not have been able to have the gun. But the other thing we have to look at is, again, revising the laws. When we're looking at mental illness, we're looking more at psychosis, schizophrenia, whether they're hearing voices or seeing things. And that's not the only kind of mental illness out there. There's this guy's mental illness, which has to do with paranoid delusional behavior, which doesn't rise to the level of a schizophrenia, and therefore these individuals are falling through the cracks and still being able to buy guns. And I would say that's the major issue. People with personality disorders having guns, people who are very violent, very angry, and we don't realize that at the foundation of that is a real mental illness. So this guy may have been judged as just a really angry, inappropriate guy, but this was a guy who was really emotionally unstable.
Well, I don't know that you need to revise gun laws. Maybe you need to revise what the responsibility of policemen are to report violent behavior in a workplace. That in itself can set off the red flag. Revising more laws. We have ample laws that restrict gun ownership. It has to be enforced. There has to be a proper dialogue or a proper tracking of things. How do you feel about that?
Well, I certainly understand your point of view, and we don't want to trample on the Second Amendment. But at the same time, we are getting a better understanding because of all of these cases as to what mental illness looks like. And so I believe these laws need to be revised to be able to pick up not just people with, who hear voices or see things or who are psychotic, but people who also have mental illnesses that go beyond that, that include individuals with severe rage and anger who are powder kegs. Those individuals are angry not just because of the world, but because of mental illness.
Look, one of the things that struck me was from the time he was dismissed to the time of the shooting was like more than a year, I think it was. I was surprised by that. Is that unusual?
It's not unusual because I think what we're seeing is, and it's a great point, what was happening in the 2 years since he was last employed there. What do we know about his family? What do we know about his friends? What are other people saying? Something was posted on CNN where they showed him in a road rage sort of behavior. So he wasn't quiet for those 2 years. He was still acting out, and then it culminated in this. If it wasn't this station killing, it would have been something somewhere else.
All right, listen, Dr. Jeff Gardere, psychologist, thank you so much for joining us to help us try to get some sense out of all this.
Always a pleasure. Thank you. Bye-bye.